Now in the following sections when we're looking at Africa, we're going to look at specific parts of Africa, country by country, experience by experience, lodge by lodge, and different types of safari experiences you can have in Africa. But before we do that, we need to get some basic ground knowledge out of the way first. We'll start by looking at Africa and dividing it up into the sections. Firstly, it's most importantly, Africa is very big. In fact, it's often misrepresented by the size. To give you an idea of the actual size of Africa, and not the size you may see on a map, if you were to get UK, Western Europe, Eastern Europe, India, China, Japan, and the USA, put them all together, Africa would still be bigger, with some room left over. That's how big of a continent Africa is. So to have 3 weeks to do the entirety of it, it's just not going to happen. Now looking at Africa though, there are the 4 main sections. There's East Africa, Southern Africa, Western Africa, and Northern Africa. Northern Africa is made up of countries like Egypt and Morocco. And people tend to associate these countries purely by their name. I want to go to Egypt, I want to go to Morocco. They don't tend to say Africa, I want to go to Cairo. So when you're talking about Africa, most people will associate that with something else. West Africa is made up of countries like Nigeria, Mali, Sierra Leone, and is not commonly travelled to. This is an area you won't have to worry too much about. We're going to focus on East and Southern Africa. Now if somebody says Africa to you, and you picture the Lion King, or Out of Africa, or some combination of those two, then you're thinking of East Africa. East Africa is made up of Kenya, Tanzania, Uganda, and Rwanda. Now this is the area of big flat savannas, big grassy plains. It's very iconic and very historical. These big grassy plains support huge amounts of wildlife, massive herds of wildebeest, the old David Attenborough documentaries with lions and zebras and hyenas. That image of Africa is East Africa. Getting around East Africa can be difficult though. It is a third world country area, so transportation can be a problem. Therefore, in this area, you'll need a driver guide to take you around those areas. We'll focus on that a little more in another section. Southern Africa is a little bit different. Whereas East Africa is about the concentration of animals, Southern Africa is about the diversity, not just of the animals, but of the experience. Southern Africa is a mixture of culture, history, scenery, wineries, shopping, whatever you can think of will be mixed up into Southern Africa. In East Africa, as you're looking out over the savannah, you may see a journey, they're called a journey, of giraffes wandering across the savannah from a distance. In Southern Africa, the bush is a bit denser, a bit scrubbier, and you won't get that distance view. You will have to get closer to the animals in order to see them, and that can be an advantage of Southern Africa. You often have to get quite close to the animals, a few metres away, to see them up close and personal. Also, in terms of diversity, you'll have diversity of animal experience. So in the morning, you'll see some lions, and then see some leopard, and then maybe some rhino. Whereas East Africa, you spend more time out amongst the scenery, seeing all the animals as part of a big ecosystem. It's a different way of looking at Africa. Southern Africa, though, is a big area. It's made up of quite a few countries. South Africa, Namibia, Botswana, Zambia, and Zimbabwe. And it can be quite confusing for quite a few people. East Africa we know as the Lion King section. Uganda and Rwanda right next to that is home to the gorillas. So Tarzan, if you need a visual representation. But down the bottom, it's a lot of countries to put together. So here's a quick tip on how to remember it. South Africa is quite simple. We know South Africa, we're confident with South Africa. But Zambia, Zimbabwe, Botswana, and Namibia, sometimes called the Batman countries, Zim Zam, Botsnam, are those 4 that you need to remember. How I'd like to remember them is this: the waters, the deserts, and the watery deserts. It's quite simple. The waters are Victoria Falls on the border of Zambia and Zimbabwe. It's a waterfall, a lot of water, therefore it's the waters. On the opposite side, you have Namibia, which is the deserts. Big salt pans and big desert and sand dunes. That's the deserts. Where water meets a desert, you end up with a watery desert. This is Botswana, in the middle of the two, and it is a flooded desert. I know that sounds stupid, but it is a desert country that gets flooded from the north of it. So if you remember that, you'll be fine. East Africa, Southern Africa. Waters, deserts, watery deserts. We're on our way.